All right, so on the subject of diversity, how diverse are women's movements within Muslim majority societies?
Well, this how diverse is in the Muslim society, especially in Afghanistan. I'm talking about Afghanistan. I think that it is very diverse in Afghanistan because we have different ethnic groups. Everyone is involved. But how strong is this movement in Afghanistan is not at all. This movement, even it was not existed. This movement, and during the time that the Russian invaded Afghanistan, that time we had the one movement that Rawa really politically got involved in that movement, and then it was so much was controlled that disappeared into other country.
So the women's movement is how recent, would you say?
It's very recent, especially that because the women were living in the refugee camp in the Pakistan or in Iran, so people got exposed to different kind of situation that they were desperate, and so they start really struggling and really finding a solution for it. The movement is very recent, but how is recent is it is with the NGO. Really, if the NGO is not involved, we don't have really a movement in Afghanistan.
The NGOs.
And NGOs are the one. And what kind of group of people are in the NGOs? But right now, you can say maybe 0.5% of the people involved in that. And the elite group, some. Middle class, maybe a little bit. But we have 99% of our people are poor. So they are not involved at all in the movement. So if you call a movement, there is not a movement in Afghanistan. And that's the reason that really education is really badly needed. And that's the area that we are working to just get the movement to start, because people don't know what's their right. They don't know how to start, from where to start, especially the poor area, which is 99% of the people are poor.
Certainly. Yeah. Zainab, you must have seen women's movements in a variety of Muslim societies. What are the various agendas you've seen, and where?
I don't think there's various agendas as much as there are various stages of development. I agree with you, Daisy. I am surprised to hear Iran is one of the top 5, because I always thought of Iranian women's movement as a very impressive and progressive movement in which women try to take the ownership of interpreting Islam and interpreting religious law. And that by itself was actually, in many ways, Iranian women were way ahead of Arab women, for example, in the Islamic interpretation from a woman's perspective. On the other hand, they're in a different stages. Indonesian women are very developed in their own movement, actually, and have lobbied a lot the Indonesian government about how to preserve women's rights within an Islamic framework. And I do want to talk about the issues of framework, because whenever we talk about women's rights, and I'm so glad you mentioned what you mentioned, because I completely agree that a lot of it is colonial history as well. There's an obsession with the word Sharia. Mm-hmm. And Sharia is not the Sharia. It's the content that we are discussing in here. It's what's inside the Sharia, it's not the framework. So whether it's secular framework or religious framework, it's not the issue. And we often tend to be very obsessed with the framework of the discussion. Egyptian women, for example, recently have a very interesting movement in Egypt, where they are trying to change women's family law one step at another, from the renegotiation of what is a marriage law in Egypt. Now a woman who gets married in Egypt has a multiple choices of all the legal contracts and legal rights that she can negotiate for her marriage. So they are in different stages of development. If I am to talk about to generalize the history of women's movement, contemporary women's movement in the Muslim world, I would say Indonesian women are very one of the pioneers, and then Iranian women. And Arab women recently really are catching up, but it's in the last 10 years or decades that the Arab women started to catch up with the women's movement. Would that be right, Daisy?
Well, I'm not a specialist in this, but I can tell you that having I'm also the wife of an imam, so I get to see the various strands of the Muslim community, because in New York City we have the whole global Muslim community here. And we do have socially conservative women who are hanging on to a certain interpretation. We do have secularists in our community. We do have firebrand feminists who really genuinely believe that feminism is the path towards, freeing ourselves up. Then we have kind of like the human rights arguments, the activists who will use any kind of framework. All of these exist, and all of them exist in the Muslim community. What has happened is, because they're all running on parallel tracks in different countries, kind of bringing them together, they're fragmented. And there is no one Muslim movement that is emerging, because some people, because of the interpretation, some people feel there isn't enough of a religious discourse going on. Others feel this is a human rights discourse which gets linked to the West, and so therefore it's a Western imposition. Who created human rights arguments anyway? This is what I'm always told when I go to countries. Who created them? It was the West. You guys created them and you want to impose them on us. So there's a lot of that kind of discussion going on, and I think that having seen this diversity, and Pinar said we have tremendous diversity, when Anisa Mehdi said I launched this initiative last year, and the first thing I said was everybody's voice has to be included. Everybody. It doesn't matter if the person is absolutely even denying their faith. They have to be in the room because we have to hear from these people. And then the other thing that has been missing largely, and I think which might be really effective, of course it's my idea, so obviously I think it's going to be effective, is really to collapse the space between the grassroots activists and the academics. Western academics are doing incredible new theology work right here in the United States and in the West in general, because they're free. They're free to explore their faith. There's some critical thinking going on, but oftentimes it sits in these wonderful libraries. All these books collect dust. They talk amongst themselves, they present their papers, and I'm saying, why don't you guys take this wonderful stuff that you have in these intellectual dimension, bring it down to the grassroots level, and let's collapse the space. Because only when we have the academics leading the parade for us with some kind of critical thinking, and the grassroots buy into it, the activists, the people that are at this level, we can buy and we can pamphletized this information, get it out there into various countries. And that is what, WISE is about, and I'm hoping that will catch on.
I have a question from the floor which ties into that, Daisy. It says, do you have any idea what percentage of women in Muslim communities, countries, agree with religious concepts of women, and which percentage rebel against it? How many Muslim, it's a hard question, so you're answering intuitively here. But I have for example, a friend in Iran who wears a scarf on her head, and she says, I wear my scarf for Islam. And she wears the chador, which is the head-to-toe black cape that Iranian women wear. And she says, and I wear this for Iran. So she had a religious statement and she had a political statement, a national statement, both of which she donned proudly. So any guess how many, the percentage of Muslim women or numbers?
I don't have a percentage, but I can tell you a pulse test.
Pulse test is
Pulse
good.
test is, oddly enough, the Muslim women are the most comfortable Muslim women live in the Muslim women who are most comfortable with using a religious framework are living in the West. This is where I found the most embracing, people saying, oh yeah, because they know their religion. They know they can delve into the books, they can go to the internet, they can research anything, you can Google anything, you can find anything. You have many people that you can go to their academic institutes where you can learn this stuff. And when you go to certain Muslim countries, you kind of get this, first of all, people don't know what their rights are. So they don't even know how to, voice their rights. They are being violated because they don't even have their rights. Masouda Jalal, who was with us, told us that women don't even know how to pray, that because their husbands told them, I'll pray for you, you'll go to paradise with me. So when you don't even have access to spiritual teachings, you're not a full participant, even in your religion, what are you supposed to fight for? You don't even know, And just to give you an example of how this has kind of escalated up to the next level, UNDP, which is the United Nations, I think, UNFPA, it just was trying to also bring in the religious voices into this issue of population health. And they got the most pushback, they said, from their network in Asia and the Middle East. We don't want to touch religion. We don't want to talk about it. You guys are wasting our time. Religion has been, a source of angst for us, and they're partnering with us because we're using a religious discourse, and because we in the West are comfortable and free to use their religious framework. I don't know if I answered that question, but it's the only way I know how to.
Anyone else have pulse on that, Zainab?
Well, I want to add to your question. It's very interesting what you said in here, because I think there was, if I'm talking about the Arab world, there was a women's movement. It was a socialist women's movement in the 60s. And these women are don't want to talk about religion. And I completely understand that the switch has happened in the 90s, when the reality in the Middle East is that the street is winning, and the street is a religious street. It's not a secular street anymore. It used to be a secular street in the 60s. And a lot of the women activists who express them, from Nawal Saadawi to different women activists who were so anti-religion, and I don't know about Nawal Saadawi, but as much as other women who are saying, we've got to learn the Quran, and we've got to learn the religion, and most importantly, we've got to claim it. Because when I'm arguing with this religious person and he's quoting things that I don't know how to quote back, I'm losing the argument. And that's the shift in the women's movement, I would say. There was always a women's movement. It just was a secular feminist one, and now it's going more, let's argue for women's rights within a religious framework. And I would say now, prejudice, I think all of us have the same issues, which is you, as someone expressed about you. We grew up in in families that there was no restrictions on us. So I don't, from my pulse read, there was never a contradiction for me between Islam and my rights. I've always seen it as a problem of interpretation and a problem of ignorance, but I've never seen religion itself as the problem itself.
One of the trends that I see is women around the world, Muslim women, are using, as you've said, all of you, using their religion and the Quran itself to be a backup for their demand for rights. It says here in this book, and the more they know their rights in the book, they can argue more convincingly.
If I may say, I agree that the religious in Afghanistan, right, people don't know what is their right or what is they are can exercise. But the one thing that through working as an NGO and working with the different community and working with community leader and trying to involve people in the community in the grassroots level, the women, once they get to know their rights and they understand that this rights is their rights, and it says in Quran, you are surprised to see how many people come and they want to study. And I give you the best statistic. Once we first put the women's right workshop in refugee camp, and that was we provided in the city of Peshawar, and the news went like this, like a fireball, and went everywhere. And from every camp, people came, because what happened, we take verses from Quran and explain to them that Quran gave you the right. If your husband or your brother says that it's not right, and you hear it's from Quran, it's Quran verses. And once we got that, we could not even accommodate so many people, because they are coming, they want to know, and they discuss with their family, and they are spreading the news, and they want to learn from this religiously.
And I am so sorry, but I want to give an example of that. We have a woman in Afghanistan. I was there a couple of years ago, and she had lifted her burqa, and she said, my husband always beat me up for 20 years of my marriage. Never questioned whether he had the right to slap me or not. And then I went through, and in this case, we do the same in the Women for Women International's training. And I learned for the first time it's not in his right. So she's telling me, with her tattoos in her face, tattoos are called the makeup of the poor. She said, one day I went home and he tried to slap me, and I held his hand and I said, don't communicate with me this way. And I swear, I was like, my mouth was dangling. I was like, you did that? And she said, yes. And I talked to him and I said, communicate differently. This is not in your right. And she said, the last year was the first year that we actually have a decent marriage. Wow. And so is change possible? Yes. Absolutely, with education and awareness. And that's what's happening. The trend is women claiming their rights.
Just give it.
Yes, and I want to move on to another area, which I think you'll be the first one to respond to, which is, given the collapsing of, or the expansion and collapsing of communication technologies, and the influence and the fast and speedy influence of West on East and the response of the East, and the tension now between us all. Question from the floor: how are multinational corporations influencing changes to the position of women? How is this cross-cultural, cross-civilizational communication making a difference in terms of women's rights? On beyond, it's you telling us and you're imposing it on us. You're from the crossroads of East and West.
I mean, I think I will tie this question to the first one. I think there is only one women's movement. I mean, because if you believe in gender equality and you have an analysis of why this gender equality is happening, then we are all in solidarity. I mean, it is, I mean, the people in the movement might be diverse, from west, from east, in the globe, at the global level. At the national level, old women, young women, women with headscarf, without headscarf, religious, secular, whatever. So the people might be diverse, but I think both at the national level, in Muslim societies, and globally, the analysis is common. Our analysis is common, and I think there's a global movement, and we are all parts of that. So the East and West, I mean, I think this is what is happening. And the more we encounter each other, yes, the communication has increased. I think internet has created wonders in that. But I must also say that the internet is only in the past decade. I have been working, not only me, some friends here, for example, the co-founder of WWHR. We've been working with the international movement at a time when there was no internet. I remember running to the post office with my faxes as the fax came out, or before that, letters. We collected information on domestic violence in the world through letters. I'll never forget that one of the letters from Venezuela came in 6 weeks, and we were waiting. So it's like, I think women are so imaginative. But I think this communication is really helping us, and maybe, I hope, accelerating our struggle.
Thank you. What about influence of multinational companies, too? Is that having any impact? Supporting work, detracting from efforts?
I mean, I don't know about multinational companies. I can tell you about multilateral agencies, from the UN to different governments, and it's not necessarily positive. And I would say not because the intention is wrong, but because there's a set of assumptions that they come with. And then they respond with the realities, with these sets of assumptions, more than the reality. So I have two examples. One is Kosovo. Now, Kosovo is predominantly a Muslim region. It's not a country yet. And it's a very traditional region, actually. Women for Women works in so many different countries. And where we get the most resistance is not Afghanistan, it's Kosovo, because it's such a traditional society, and they survived in an underground society for many years under Yugoslavia. And in war, gender dynamics switch. Women have to leave the house and have to take more active space in the public sphere. So actually, war gives opportunity for women to renegotiate women's rights. The first thing that a lot of the agencies of the UN, not all of the agencies of the UN, all designed programs to keep women inside the house and not to keep them outside the house. And we were saying, why are you doing this? They already left. There was a mainstream acceptance of women leaving. Why are you returning them back? They said, no, it's their culture. And it's the same thing in Iraq. Now, the first thing in Iraq, right after the recent U.S. invasion of Iraq, a lot of Iraqi women said, now we're going to get equality much more than we've ever had before. And Iraqi women had a good deal, mind you. I mean, we're one of the most progressive women in the Arab world, But we're now going to participate fully in the government, all of that. The U.S. government came, and out of 25 ministers that were assigned under the coalition authority, only one were women. And out of 25 of the presidential council that they assigned by the American authority, only 2 were women, and the women were not allowed to get presidential rotation as the men were. And
that was U.S.?
That's the U.S. government. And of all the delegations that were sent for U.S. To represent the U.S. in Iraq, only one gender advisor, who also was responsible for all civil society in Iraq. So Iraqi women in this case are like, we don't understand. This is the U.S. We're supposed to get much more than we had before. And it wasn't the case. And I think there was a set of assumptions that we have to preserve. One of the biggest mistakes is the first thing the U.S. Army did is, instead of Iraqi women getting their food cards through the store, as it was before, they said food distribution is going to go through the mosque. And we're saying, why the mosque? The mosque was never powerful in Iraq. Why are you switching the strategy and you're making it powerful? It's a set of assumptions that in these cases has not helped, actually, has hurt us much more than it had helped us in the progress women have made internally.